The soft hum of the air conditioner in my office contrasted sharply with the storm of thoughts in my head. I'm Julie, a 32-year-old lawyer. My life now is very different from my chaotic childhood, a past I keep hidden from everyone. The calm of my office was broken by the ringing phone. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but something about it felt eerily familiar. I answered cautiously, "Julie speaking." "Julie, it's your father," came a nervous voice that did nothing to ease my rising anxiety. A chill ran through me. I hadn't heard that voice in over a decade. It once meant safety and love, but now symbolized betrayal and pain. "Why are you calling me?" I asked sharply, cutting through the silence after his introduction. "I'm in trouble, Julie. Financial trouble. I need your help," he said, his voice cracking. His plea, however sincere, ignited a fire of resentment in me. "My help? Now you need me after all these years?" I retorted, disbelief and anger mingling in my tone. "Yes, I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. I'm really in a bind," he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help," I responded, my voice cold and firm. There was a heavy pause. "Julie, please. I'm still your dad," he said weakly, trying to revive a long-dead bond. The word dad felt foreign. "You gave up that title when you chose her over me," I said, years of suppressed anger and hurt coming out. "You're my daughter." "You thought wrong," I interrupted, cutting him off. "You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine." His voice was a mix of pleading and despair. "Julie, I am sorry. I just need this one favor." The word sorry echoed in my office, empty and meaningless. "Sorry doesn't change the past. I can't help you," I said firmly and hung up. Before I was 9, my childhood was full of love and laughter, a testament to the wonderful life my parents and I shared in our small rented house. My mother, a beacon of joy and kindness, filled our days with warmth and our nights with stories and dreams. My father, once playful and caring, spent evenings playing games with me or teaching me about the world. Our home was a cocoon of happiness, where every day was an adventure and every night a sweet dream. But our blissful life came to an abrupt halt with my mother's untimely death. The house that once echoed with laughter and love turned into a silent memory. I remember walking through the rooms, each corner a stark reminder of her absence. The loss was unbearable for both me and my father, who had lost the love of his life. However, his grief seemed to diminish quickly, much to my confusion and dismay. Within a few months, he brought home Diane, a woman who was to take a significant role in our lives. I recall the day he introduced her, a day that marked the end of my cherished childhood. "Julie, this is Diane. She's going to be staying with us," my father announced one evening, his voice devoid of the warmth I was used to. I looked up at her, searching for a hint of motherly warmth or friendliness, but found none. Her presence was imposing, her gaze cold and calculating. From the very first moment, I sensed a change in the air, a shift that filled me with an unexplainable sense of dread. "Hello, Julie," Diane said, her voice smooth yet devoid of genuine emotion. Her smile, rather than comforting, seemed to hide something sinister beneath its surface. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were recoiling from her presence. The cheerful memories of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering unease that settled in every corner. I remember looking at Diane, trying to find something redeeming or kind about her, but her every look, every gesture seemed to be laced with an unspoken animosity. It was clear that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left, but to weave a new narrative, one in which I was an unwelcome part. As I watched her move around our home, a home that once felt safe and happy, I realized that life would never be the same again. I couldn't help but feel that her arrival was the start of something bad. The way she looked at me with eyes that seemed to hide more than they showed did not feel good for the future. The days after Diane arrived felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The house, once filled with my mother's laughter and love, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Diane's presence cast a shadow over everything, making even simple daily routines hard. One morning, as I sat down for breakfast, my food tasted unusually salty. "Diane, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked hesitantly. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake. Just eat it, Julie. Don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive and almost mocking. The incidents grew more frequent and spiteful. I remember finding my clothes ruined after doing laundry. "Diane, my clothes are all faded. What happened?" I asked one day, holding up my once favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up, or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes." I felt a surge of frustration, but knew arguing would only make things worse. Feeling helpless, I turned to my father, hoping he would see through her facade. "Dad, Diane is ruining my things. She's always mean to me," I said one evening, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. My father's reaction was far from what I had hoped for. "Julie, you're imagining things. Diane is doing her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble," he said sternly, his words cutting deep. "But Dad, it's the truth," I protested, but he wouldn't listen. "That's enough, Julie. I don't want to hear any more of your accusations," he replied, his voice rising in anger. Each day was a battle, trying to navigate around Diane's hostility and my father's indifference. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. I started spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension that hung in the air. Living in that house, I felt alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled those walls were replaced by fear and anxiety. Every day I longed for the past, for the times when my mother's smile was enough to light up the entire room, a stark contrast to the darkness that now lingered in every corner. Living with Diane became a daily ordeal of evasion and endurance. Her hostility towards me escalated from verbal jabs to physical abuse. It started subtly, a pinch on my arm or a twist on my stomach, always in places easily concealed under my clothes. The pain was sharp, a cruel reminder of my helplessness in her presence. I developed ways to avoid her, always alert to where she was in the house. I took long routes to my room or waited until she was busy before moving around. Despite my efforts, she sometimes caught me off guard, and those moments always ended in pain. One day, while I was quietly reading in the living room, Diane walked in and, for no reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain, but held back any cry. She looked at me with a cold, triumphant smirk before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed how cautiously I moved and how I flinched when Diane's voice echoed through the house. "Julie, is everything all right at home?" Grandma asked, her voice full of concern. I looked at her, my heart itching to tell the truth, but fear and the desire to protect her from worry held me back. "Yes, Grandma, everything's fine. Just a lot of schoolwork," I lied, forcing a smile. She seemed unsure, but didn't press further. I felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving her, but I couldn't bear the thought of causing her any distress. That evening, as Grandma left, I saw Diane watching from the window, her expression satisfied. It was as if she enjoyed knowing she had control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her triumphant look was a clear message that she was in power, and I was just a helpless player in her twisted game. I retreated to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Diane's pinches and twists was bearable compared to the emotional turmoil I felt. School was my sanctuary, a place where I could briefly escape the misery of home. But even there, the shadows of my struggles at home began to show. My teacher, Mrs. Jeremy, a kind-hearted woman who always encouraged her students, started to notice changes in me. One day, as I handed in my homework, she gently grabbed my wrist, her eyes drawn to the bruises on my arm. "Julie, what happened here?" These look like bruises, she said, her voice full of concern. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. It's nothing, Mrs. Jeremy. I just fell while playing, I lied, avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Jeremy didn't look convinced. Julie, if something is wrong or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak out, she urged, her eyes searching mine for the truth. I wanted to tell her everything about Diane and how scared I was, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I forced a smile. Really, Mrs. Jeremy, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident. She gave me a long, thoughtful look, then nodded slowly. All right, Julie, but remember my door is always open. You're not alone, she said with a reassuring smile. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Her kindness made it even harder to keep up the facade that everything was okay. As I walked home that day, Mrs. Jeremy's words echoed in my mind. I felt grateful for her concern and deeply lonely from carrying my burdens alone. The thought of revealing the truth about my home life was terrifying. I feared what Diane might do if she found out I had told someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thought about Mrs. Jeremy's offer to help. Diane noticed my silence. Why so quiet tonight, Julie? Cat got your tongue, she asked in a mocking tone. I just shook my head and continued eating, trying to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. After dinner, as I lay in bed, the reality of my situation felt more overwhelming than ever. Mrs. Jeremy's concern showed me that people did care, yet the fear of what revealing the truth might bring kept me silent. I was caught between wanting to tell someone and fearing Diane's retaliation, a balance I navigated every day. The day Mrs. Jeremy decided to involve my father was filled with anxiety and dread for me. I sat in the principal's office, fidgeting nervously, my mind racing with fear about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, his face was stern, his eyes showing a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "What's this about, Julie? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp as he walked in. I glanced at Mrs. Jeremy, seeking support. Swallowing hard, I tried to find my voice. "Dad," Mrs. Jeremy saw the bruises, I stammered, feeling his gaze on me. Before I could explain further, he interrupted, his anger palpable. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" he snapped. Mrs. Jeremy stepped in, her tone firm yet calm. "Mr. Smith, I'm concerned about Julie's well-being. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to address this." My father's face darkened with anger. "She's perfectly safe at home. Julie, are you spreading lies about our family?" He turned towards me, his disappointment clear. I've been holding back, but now the words started to spill out. "It's not lies, Dad. Diane, she's been hurting me," I managed to say, finally telling the truth. His reaction was total disbelief. "Diane? That's ridiculous. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't have you accusing her of this." "But Dad, it's the truth," I cried out, desperate for him to believe me. He stood up abruptly, losing his patience. "Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Jeremy you made it all up." I turned to Mrs. Jeremy and repeated his words. She nodded but didn't say anything. When we got home, he locked me in my room without another word. Through the door, I could hear Diane's voice, dripping with false concern. "I told you, she's just seeking attention," she said. I sat on my bed, feeling utterly alone and despairing. The one person I thought I could count on had turned his back on me. My room, which had once been my haven, now felt like a prison. The pain of the physical abuse was nothing compared to the emotional torment of being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me unconditionally was now the source of my deepest pain. The days following my confinement were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. Trapped and feeling utterly alone, I realized my only hope lay in my grandmother, my father's mother. She was kind and loving and had always shown me affection, but I had never dared to burden her with my troubles at home. One evening, I was sure Diane and my father were occupied. I gathered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. "Hello," her familiar warm voice came through the phone. "Grandma, it's me, Julie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Julie, my dear, how are you?" she asked, her tone filled with genuine care. Tears welled up in my eyes as I replied, "Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. "What's wrong, Julie? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath, the words rushing out. "It's Diane. She's been hurting me, and Dad won't believe me. I don't know what to do." I could hear the concern in her voice as she quickly responded, "Of course, my dear. You come right over." "I'll take care of this," Grandma said. The next day she arrived. Though she was small, her presence filled the room. She confronted my father with surprising strength. "Tyler, I'm taking Julie with me. She's not safe here," she declared firmly. My father, taken aback, tried to protest. "Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter." "Your daughter whom you failed to protect," she countered sharply. "I won't stand by and watch her suffer." Diane tried to intervene. "She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us." Grandma turned to Diane, her eyes steely. "I know a scared child when I see one. Julie is coming with me, and if you try to stop me, I'll take this matter to the authorities." Realizing he was defeated, my father didn't put up any further resistance. As I gathered my things, I saw Diane's expression change from defiant to defeated. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. Once we arrived, she turned to me and said, "You're safe now, Julie. You don't have to worry anymore." In my grandmother's house, I found the love and security that had been missing in my life. It was a haven where I could heal and regain my strength. The contrast between her nurturing home and the coldness of my father's house was stark. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again, free from the fear and anxiety that had plagued me. Years passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home was a sanctuary, a place of healing and love. But time moved on, and with it came another wave of change. My beloved grandmother passed away, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. At the funeral, my father and Diane showed up, their faces a mix of fake sorrow and poorly disguised eagerness. It was clear they were more interested in what they might gain from her passing than in mourning her loss. After the funeral, as we gathered at my grandmother's house, Diane wasted no time. "Well, Julie, I suppose you'll be finding a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belongs to your father," she said, her voice tinged with barely concealed glee. My father nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room as if already planning what to do with the house. I couldn't help but smile, a reaction that seemed to confuse them. "Actually, that's where you're wrong," I said, the confidence in my voice taking them by surprise. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his expression shifting to one of confusion. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Grandma left a will. She gave the house and a lot of money to me," I explained, watching as their faces changed from confusion to shock. "But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of any inheritance you get," my father stammered, his entitlement clear. Diane's voice was shrill. "Yes, until you come of age, your father will manage your property." Their reactions were almost amusing. "You don't care about me at all. You didn't even wish me a happy birthday. I turned 19 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions," I stated firmly, enjoying the realization dawning on their faces. My father's expression turned from shock to anger, then to desperate pleading. "Julie, you can't do this. We're your family." I looked at them, memories of my childhood flooding back. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said, my voice steady. Diane stepped forward, now begging. At least let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. We haven't extended the lease on our house. I shook my head. This is my house now. You'll need to find somewhere else. As they left, years of pain and neglect seemed to lift off my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, filled with memories of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The echoes of the past, stirred by my father's call, remained. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But amid all that, there was also a sense of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest times.